Hello and welcome to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. This is a platform where we get curious about all things gender, sex and sexuality, as well as feminism, the inclusive kind, mental health and kink, and all that makes us humans unique and diverse. From body positivity to body dysmorphia, it's all welcome here. Come with us on a journey of inclusion, acceptance and respect. I'm your host, Esther Lemons. I identify as a cisgender woman and my pronouns are she and her. In this episode, I'm speaking to Mel, a former professional jockey who sold her house and most of her possessions in 2015 to follow her dream of living and travelling America in an RV. Mel's pronouns are she and her, and she identifies as non-binary, asexual and aromantic. Find out what that means to Mel in this episode. We also talk about fitting in and trying to be normal, living life on your own terms, and how just being you is an evolution as well as a revolution when it comes to soul alignment. It was recorded on the 23rd of August 2020. Now let's get into the episode. Hello, what's your name?
Hi Esther, my name is Mel Dafnis. I'm happy to be with you here today.
Thanks for being with me. And how do you identify?
I identify as she. I've never had a problem with that. So I know some people do they, but she is fine with me. I'm okay with that.
She pronouns, you mean? Yeah. And you mentioned the label non-binary, which is something you've come across fairly recently. Is that right?
Yes, I am 55. I'll be 56 next month. And actually it was last year that I realized that I wasn't just a weirdo. That there was actually a sort of an explanation. I don't want to say label, but a name for what I felt all my life, but never, I just kind of kept it quiet, I guess you could say. But I've always just been me, and I've always been absolutely okay with being me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I never realized it was anything until I kind of was looking it up on Google, and I saw that there was a book, and I ordered a book online and started reading about it. I'm like, oh, there's more people like that out there. I always thought I was just like really weird or really off or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, what did weird mean? What was that like for you?
Well, I tried to fit in many years ago. I tried to be normal, whatever that was. I had, I actually was always myself ever since I was a little kid. I mean, my mother used to talk about chasing me around the house with a dress because I think when I first had to go to school, girls had to wear dresses and I absolutely hated them. I'm like, how can you play in a dress? I'm sorry, but no.
This is not
you have
practical.
to be like, yeah, it's not practical at all. So I always hated dresses. I always loved cowboy boots and cowboy hats, and I never called them cowgirl hats or cowgirl boots. I never played with girly dolls or any of that. I always did my own thing. Like if I went to a store right now, I would go to a tool store and go look at tools rather than jewelry,
Right.
But I sort of tried to fit in, and I had boyfriends, and I actually was engaged once, and luckily for me, I'm also a very intuitive person, and I really could not live a life that I knew was not me.
Mm-hmm.
And even though I was trying to be normal, and whatever you call normal, I mean, I say that now, but I know there is really no normal. It's whatever you want to be. And I just was always me. And when anybody ever gave me any problems about it, I just stood up for myself and I said, this is me and this is how I want to be and this is who I'm going to be. And tough crap, if you don't like it, then I don't have to be your friend or know you or whatever. And my family was always very accepting of me as me. They didn't force me. My grandmother probably was the only one that ever said, why don't you get married and have kids and have a house? And, it was my grandmother, but I was very close to her and she knew who I was. And that was just her upbringing. She wanted the best for me. She did it from a point of love. And after a while, she just realized that I was me and I was always going to be me. And she was okay
all that
with that.
Normal stuff wasn't going to happen. Yeah.
She actually was very proud of me for who I was and what I did. So, and I know that.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it's nice. It's nice to be supported in that, actually, because a lot of people unfortunately aren't so lucky. So to talk a bit more about some other labels that you mentioned. So asexual is one and aromantic is another. So is that something that you also discovered, or the labels themselves, when you discovered the term non-binary, or is that something that you've known about for longer?
Actually, I was looking up, like, what if you don't like sex?
Yeah.
Like, I just don't like it. Like, I don't need it. I don't desire it.
Mm.
Like I said, I lived with a couple of guys. I tried. I was like, this just isn't me. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't like it. And I thought, God, I'm so freaking weird. I'm so non-normal. I must be the only person in the world. I know there's got to be more out there. And that's actually when I started to look things up. And then so when I saw the term asexual, and I'm like, well, that's a term, because I only knew the biological term,
Right.
like an amoeba that can't reproduce. I thought, oh, I didn't know there was another meaning to the term. I never knew that. Like,
Yeah.
so I started looking into that, and I'm like, oh, there's more people like that out there. This is a thing. This is like, this is real. It's not just me. I'm not the only person in the world. And really, I thought I probably was. So I ended up ordering a book online called The Invisible Orientation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about asexuality. And it talks about it being a real thing. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not screwed up. You're not mentally, whatever, like mentally ill or something like that. It's actually a thing. And there's more people out there. And I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like, I think being, homosexual, heterosexual, I think it's like, whatever you are is whatever you are, right? I never, like, I don't, it's okay with me, it's like who you are. So then I started to kind of realize, oh, that's who I am. And it's okay to be that way, because even my own sister was saying, well, maybe you'll find the right guy one day, so I'm heterosexual, asexual. There's all these little, it goes off in so many directions that I can't even remember all the categories. And then I realized that I'm aromantic. Like, I don't even want to, like, go out with I don't even want to date. Like, I don't even want somebody in my life. I always thought I was just a loner. Like, I just didn't want to be around people, but I'm not really so introverted that way that I'm not afraid of being around people. I'm not afraid of having friends. I'm not afraid of having close friends. So it wasn't anything like that. And I tell you what, this was the only book I ever found about it. It's The Invisible Orientation by Julie Sandra Decker. And it's called an Introduction to Asexuality. And it goes into a lot of things. It's a really, really, really good book. It was really hard to find, and it explained a lot of things. It explained the non-binary, which I never knew was a thing. The aromantic, I never knew. And I'm like, oh, now it makes so much sense to me. It was really a relief.
Yeah.
A big relief to read that book and to realize that. And I remember sitting down with my cousin who lives in New York, and he's known he was gay since probably his high school days. And he's married, and he's lived that way for a long time. I remember him sitting me down one day when I was visiting him, and he's like, "Are you sure you're not gay?" And he was just saying, he was from a point of love. He was saying, "I don't want you to feel like you have to hide it." Because we had an aunt, my grandmother's sister, who never got married, never, never had kids, always kind of lived alone. And he said, well, she was always called a spinster, and maybe she was gay and didn't know it. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I know I'm not. He's like, well, you play softball, you ride a motorcycle, you were a jockey, you do all these things that kind of point to that. And I said, no, that's really not it. It's just not it. It's just not me. I'm not attracted to women. I would be okay if I was. I would be totally okay with it. I would be me if I was.
Yeah.
But it's just not. And I was like, and I realized he said that from a place of love. I never held it against him. I never thought anything bad. And I was confused. I didn't know. I'm like, well, then there must be something wrong with me. If he thinks this and other people think I'm just waiting for the right guy, and there must be something wrong with me, And then I realized, after reading the book, that it's not. It's okay. It's who I am.
Yeah.
Even though I say I've always been who I am, I always had this thought in the back of my mind. And whenever I would go out with my sister, she's like, well, there's this guy here, and he might like to go out. And I'm like, I'm just not interested. Is it okay to just not be interested? Like, I just don't want that. Like, but I would never be accepted, like, because they were trying to help.
Yeah.
Like, from a place of love. I'm okay with that. I know that. I realize that. I'm like, I'm not mad at anybody for trying to set me up or trying to say, maybe you just haven't found the right person. It's like, it's just not it. And by finding out, and there's three things: non-binary. I've never identified either way, but I've never known I was non-binary. Like, I just wear the clothes I want to wear. I do the things I want to do. I act the way I want, and that's okay. But now I can say, oh, well, this, oh, okay, other people are like that and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a huge discovery for me to understand that, just an understanding on my part, just to like know that. It's like, oh, okay, it's okay. There are other people like that. Okay, I'm not like just one weird anomaly, because it's from reading this book, they were saying that asexual people are about 1% of the population.
That's still a lot of people, right?
It's still a lot of people, and
Mm-hmm.
they call it the invisible orientation because it's not really talked about. It's not really like, well, people think, well, that's not biologically correct. You have to be attracted to someone sexually, romantically. They're like, that can't be. Well, I don't understand how people don't like chocolate because I love chocolate.
Right.
And I'm like, that's not natural not to like chocolate. Who doesn't like chocolate? Maybe 1% of the population. So I always think of it that way, like you can like and not like whatever you want. I'm just not interested in sex or romance or being identified as male or female. I'm like, okay with it.
Yeah. See, that's such a good point, because I know I have a few friends who are asexual or or aro, and I think maybe sometimes people think, oh, there must be something wrong with you if you're asexual. And I do think that maybe some people are asexual maybe because they've experienced trauma, and
Yes.
other people are just asexual because they're asexual. But to be honest, the reason, quote unquote,
Right.
it's irrelevant. It's your choice, or maybe I don't know if you want to call it a choice. Some people might
Right.
not call it that, but in the end, the reason doesn't matter because it's valid, and you can be that if you want to be that, or if you need to be that, or if you feel that's who you are, and it's all fine. So yeah.
Yeah, and if I had known earlier in my life, geez, I came up through high school in the late 70s, early 80s, and back then it was just nothing like that was talked about a lot. And I went through all the thoughts. Well, maybe I'm gay and I just don't know. I don't know. Like I don't know, but and so I tried. I thought, well, maybe I can make myself, like just have a regular life. And it never worked out. It never worked out because it's not who I was. It's absolutely not who I was. And after a while, I just said, it's not who I am and it's not who I'm going to be. And I'm just going to go on and be me.
Yeah, because in the end, it is just society, isn't it? Telling us we have to be a certain way. And if we're not, then it's like you get the peer pressure from basically everyone, with good intentions, some of them, and some maybe not, but still, it's that pressure anyway, isn't it? So that's basically, you've kind of always, by the sound of it, lived life on your terms.
Yep. It hasn't always been easy. It hasn't always been accepted, but I personally have always just believed in that. It was so funny because when I became a professional jockey, there were a few women jockeys, and it's just because I loved horses, and it was a childhood dream, and I had a chance to fulfill it. I fell into it accidentally, but I had a chance to go for it, and I did it. And it wasn't until years later when somewhere or someone mentioned, well, that's one of the only sports like that, and I think maybe car racing, where women compete absolutely equally with men on equal terms. Like there's no given, there's no extra advantage, there's no nothing. And I never went into it because of that. I just went into it because I never saw myself as male or female. I'm like, I just want to be a jockey. I could care less if there's fewer women than men. I actually, then I realized I never even thought of that. Like, I never thought I'm a woman and I'm going to be in a man's world. I'm like, who cares? I'm me and I want to do this. Why can't I do it? So it's interesting to look back. Hindsight is always 20/20. Look back and go, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so it's like a moving away from gender altogether. Like it doesn't mean anything. There's obviously these biological differences between us as people, but besides that, who cares, right?
Yeah, that's what I always thought. Nobody else has to get up in the morning and pull my pants on and live my life. I do.
I love that.
So I don't care what they say because they're not in my shoes. They're not putting my shoes on and they're not walking through my day and they're not being me. So who cares what they say?
True that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So how do you, now that you've kind of found all this stuff out or learned these terms and thought, wow, there's other people out there like me, what do you feel that's done for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's validated that I'm not just a weirdo. Honestly, I felt, but when I read the book, I felt very relieved. I mean, I think I read through the whole thing in like 1 or 2 nights. It was like, wow, I can't put this book down because it's explaining all the ways I felt. And seeing that a lot of other people went through that, I felt validated. Like, okay, all right, this isn't just, and honestly, you when you are kind of like that, you kind of feel like you're the only one, because I really don't have, because I haven't been socially in those groups growing up, like with being able to meet other people like that, or even in other groups, even in the whole spectrum of people. I haven't been in there. And even in the book, they talk about how asexuality is sometimes an outlier of hetero and homosexuality, because I'm a heterosexual asexual. Like, I'm attracted physically to men, but I don't want to have sex with men. I don't want to have a romance with men. But so I'm sort of not in the homosexual group. So it's kind of an outlying thing. And it's like, it's okay with me, because for me, it was just a validation. Like, luckily, I've been validated by my whole life. I think for younger people growing up and feeling that way, and I've been very lucky and very blessed to, I don't know why or how I've been the person I have been. And maybe it's because my family just, they didn't fight it. They're just like, you are who you are, and we'll accept you for who you are. I wasn't, pushed. I could have been pushed more into fitting a certain stereotype, but luckily I never was in my family. In fact, my dad and I have been riding motorcycles together and playing. We used to play football outside. So I'm kind of the son he never had, but so I'm kind of both his daughter and his son at the same time. And he was cool with that, because it worked out. I was lucky. There are a lot of young people that are made to not feel like it's acceptable. So I haven't felt like I needed to go out and find a group of people or even go into that, because at this age, I'm like, I am who I am, and I'm good with it. I'm very happy. I feel very validated to know that I'm not the only one, and there are other people out there, and that it has a name. I'm not just out there like floating around. But yeah, what it's done for me mostly is just brought me to terms with what it is, and made me more okay with all of it as a person. And I think that was a step in my evolution. You kind of know where I've gone with starting the new business, Aligned Soul Revolution. That was all part of it. That all fell into line with, oh yeah, aligning with my own soul and who I am. It's who I am. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I love that, because I find if you run your own business or do your own thing, it is a personal development journey like no other, right? And I think it's interesting, because for myself as well, like starting the podcast and this project, it's made a lot of things fall into place, and it's really evolved me. Like, I'm evolving through it or something. I'm not quite sure how to put it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It's a revolution and an evolution at the same exact time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love it.
And one other thing I'll mention is that it's helped me to, my name is Melissa. My family has always called me Lisa. My name was supposed to be Melissa, but it turned out to be Melissa.
Right.
But it's also helped me to just claim the name Mel. And I like that, because it's like, okay, Mel. To me, that helps me to put out the non-binary. Okay, Mel. Look at that name. They don't know if I'm male or female, which is fine with me.
Fair enough.
So it's helped me to claim that, and that's who I prefer to be. That's the name I prefer to use now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Moving forward, living your life on your terms. What does that look like?
That looks like, for me, helping other people do the same thing. Maybe even helping other people. I know there's people out there my age or older who probably have the same thing. I've met a lot of single women who are absolutely fine being single, and we've always been kind of like, oh, they're single women. Like in the old days, they would have called them spinsters or whatever you want to call them. They're like, they're like, oh, they just like to be alone. That's not true. I don't necessarily like to be alone. I always thought that. I always thought I like to be alone, but I just don't want a romantic or sexual partner. And I don't really like labels. I don't like people, even the labels I have now. It's like, I'm not even labeling myself. I've always been me, but there's just a name for it, and there are women out there that are older. There are young people who feel that way and they don't know what to do with it. There are people out there that it doesn't matter to me if they're heterosexual, homosexual, if they're asexual, non-binary, male, female, whatever, they just want to align with who they are. And since we're born and since we're taught to grow up and fit into society, we're taught to fit into specific ideas that society has for us, whether it's as a gender or as a person or as a race, as a whatever it happens to be. We're taught that, well, you're a female. You need to act like a lady. There's all that. There's all of that stuff. Well, you need to, dress nicely. Well, I do dress nicely for what I want to dress like. I'm not going to go out there and put on a dress and heels just because somebody else thinks I should. You put on a dress and heels and see how you feel, especially men. They're like, no, thanks.
Yeah.
Nothing. But so going forward, I really want to help other people to align with their soul completely, not just sexually, gender-wise, whatever it is, with the life they want to live, who they are, who they really are, who they are as a person who is aligned with their soul. That really lights me up. I mean, when I say that, it's like, that's it.
Lovely. Yeah. So where can people find you online if they want to look you up?
To find me online, if they want to look me up, alignedsoulrevolution.com. That's all one word. And if you put links in, you could put that in there.
I will do, yeah.
Yeah, that's where my heart lies. I have a side gig where I do technical work for people, website work and stuff, but that'll probably be on that webpage somewhere. But really, it's about aligning with your soul and not waiting till you're, 54 years old to finally figure out that you're not the weirdest person on the planet.
Yeah.
It's important.
Absolutely. I love it. Is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
If I have one thing to tell your listeners, it would be to really sit and think about who you are not just as a person and not just as a physical entity representing, your being, but who you are as a soul that wants to come out. And whether it's through meditation, whether it's through insight, whether it's through intuition, just be who you are. Be okay with who you are. It really is okay, and you can get through life just fine doing that and being that. So that's the one takeaway I hope your listeners take away. And don't feel bad about who you are. Just be you.
Amen to that. Thanks very much, Mel. Love talking to you.
It was my pleasure, Esther. Thank you for having me on here today. I appreciate it.
You can find out more details on the website at 50shadesofgender.com/Mel, where you can also read the transcript, and you can find out more about Mel on her website, alignedsoulrevolution.com. Thank you for listening to the 50 Shades of Gender podcast. You can find us online at 50shadesofgender.com and on social media. If you like what we're doing here and you want to support us, you can do so by becoming a patron on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/50 Shades of Gender. We hope you will listen again. Until then, stay curious and open-minded.